Good afternoon, everyone. My name is E.R. Anderson. I'm the executive director of Charis Circle. Charis Circle is the nonprofit programming arm of Charis Books, and Charis Books is the South's oldest independent feminist bookstore. We're delighted to be here today with our partners from the Auburn Avenue Research Library on African American culture and history to celebrate Blackgirl on Mars. Blackgirl on Mars is a radical memoir that chronicles author, educator, and activist Lesley-Ann Brown's 2 years worth of travel searching for home. We are joined today by the author, Lesley-Ann Brown, in conversation with Tia Williams. And I'm going to introduce Tia first. Tia Williams has a 15-year career as a beauty editor for magazines including Elle, Glamour, and Essence. In 2004, she pioneered the beauty blog industry with Shake Your Beauty. She wrote the best-selling novel, The Accidental Diva, and penned 2 YA novels, It Chicks and 16 Candles. Her award-winning novel, The Perfect Find, will be adapted into a Netflix film starring Gabrielle Union, which I know folks are already very excited. Can't wait. And Tia's most recent novel, 7 Days in June, was a Hello Sunshine book club pick and a New York Times bestseller. It's also a Charis, beloved Charis title, so that is wonderful. She lives with her daughter and husband in Brooklyn. So welcome, Tia. Thank you for being with us and being our moderator today. And the person of the hour today is Lesley-Ann Brown, who is an American writer, TEDx speaker, educator, and creator of the 2005 blog Blackgirl on Mars, Notes on a Life in Copenhagen, or How My Alienation Brings Me Closer to People, which chronicled the writer's life living and mothering abroad. Her book, Decolonial Daughter, Letters from a Black Woman to Her European Son, was published in 2018 and explores themes such as migrations, ancestry, and motherhood. So thank you both so much for being here. We want to thank everybody for watching wherever you are in the world. One of the benefits of this virtual format is that we do have a global audience. So I'm always grateful for that when we are having these conversations about diaspora, that we get to do it in this global way. So for folks who are watching, feel free to ask questions, but also feel free to just kick back and eat your lunch, hang out with us, enjoy your Saturday afternoon, and listen to this beautiful and dynamic conversation. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
Hi, Lesley-Ann.
Tia, hello.
This is such a pleasure for me. I just, so everyone knows, we have known each other since 97, 98.
Yes, probably. Yes, that sounds about right.
Yeah, long time. You were one of my very first friends in Brooklyn when I moved here.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's just been such a pleasure and so exciting to see your career from afar, obviously, for so many years, since you were in Europe since 2001.
That's right. I moved 1999.
99.
Summer. Yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I've just loved your work, and this newest one has just completely knocked me out.
Thank you.
I'm excited to talk to you about it today. First of all, I have to apologize for the sling. I am a klutz.
I'm so sorry, Tia.
So first of all, I wanted to just get from you, in your words, what is this book about?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you. I would say definitely about migration, definitely about personal, historical, individual, collective migration, freedom of movement, I would say, who gets to travel, who doesn't get to travel, ideas of home. Am I frozen on the screen?
No.
Oh, okay, cool, because I'm frozen over here.
Okay.
So yeah, ideas of home, and especially I think just in terms of like how the historical die has been cast, like in light of in light of that, right. From how I'm interpreting everything. So that's what I would say.
And so what made you, because this is obviously a memoir,
Yes.
The stories sort of come from a place of, it's your point of view, it's your travels, it's your personal history, it's your relationships. But you also weave in history and, a lot of American history, European history, the history of colonialism. So it also sort of reads like a primer. Is this because you're an educator? Why did you pick this structure for this work?
Okay, so I should just say that when I was in college and I studied writing and literature, I studied autobiographical writing. I studied creative nonfiction. I studied, and I studied with some of the greats. Like that was just always, what I spent. I mean, I sort of always understood that the personal is political, the micro is the macro, that sort of thing. So that's sort of like my natural initial compulsion and entry point into like contemplating things, if that makes any sense.
Yes, okay. So that's the place you come from.
Yeah, so I would say that's what it is first and foremost. And that is what captures what has captured my interest thus far in terms of how I look at things. But it's not the only way, for sure. But I love this. My friend was telling me the other day about autoethnography, this anthropological way of studying yourself and through literature. So I was just like, okay, well, that to me is just fantastic.
I love that.
Yeah.
And it just connects you with the world and you don't feel.
I mean, that's the point, because the whole point is like, I really hope when I do it, I'm really trying to do it in a way where because I'm so critical at what I'm looking at outside. Obviously, the spiritual balance of that is that I'm heavily critical of what's going on inside as well, right?
Of course.
It works both ways. So it's, to me, the importance of that is just showing that dynamic.
Absolutely. I have to admit something embarrassing. Okay, as you know, I am married to a Danish man, and are you calling from Denmark now?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Where you have lived for quite some time. Before I met
a lifetime.
Yeah, a lifetime. Before I met my husband, I had no idea that Denmark wasn't a monolithic society. I thought everyone was blonde. I thought that's kind of what you think of when you think of a Scandinavian country. So, in reading your book, and you're talking about your students have immigrated from Iraq and Afghanistan, and also to my husband's stories growing up there. I'm shocked. I didn't know that. I would love to hear more about how, what the minority communities are like there, and if they experience, if their experience mirrors ours here.
Yeah, that's a great question as well. Denmark is, I met the world when I moved to Denmark, which is a really interesting thing because, I'm from Brooklyn, New York. It's like really cosmopolitan, you would think. And of course, I did meet a lot of many different people there. But being here, it's like it put me into contact with a different geographical demographic. And that would be like people from the so-called Middle East, people who were like, directly affected by certain things that, certain decisions that were made, like in this part of the world. So you have that. You have a lot of people that we call refugees here that are coming from a lot of these countries. You also have, you have a lot of people from different European countries. You have a lot of people who are born here, but have a parent who's from a different background. It is actually quite a cosmopolitan place, especially in certain pockets. The direction of a lot of political decisions, it doesn't necessarily reflect that, but it is there.
It's just interesting to, and I like to think of myself as a cultured, educated person. I even, I lived in Germany for 4 years when I was growing up. My father was stationed there in the military, but, there's just certain blind spots you have about the world, so that.
Well, and it's not by accident that when, the word Scandinavia is heard, that there are certain things that we attribute to that. So that's not by accident either. So it's very fascinating. I mean, when you get into like the history and you get into like what's really going on the ground, and I mean, it's, people are human beings at the end of the day. So at the end of the day, what do human beings do? It's like we travel the world, some of us, for many different reasons, and we meet up with each other, and how that. I mean, in my book, I write it. I think I wrote it as I washed upon the shore of a war that had been going on for
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
I mean, these are things that have been going back at least till biblical times, right?
Oh, definitely.
So,
right. And speaking of washing up upon the shore, you talk about before moving to Denmark, you wanted to move away from anything having to do with race.
Yeah.
And I dog-eared that page. I was like, wow, do you think there's anywhere in the world we could escape racial implications?
That's a great question. It's a great question. I would say that when I first came to Denmark, when I first started like kind of leaving the States, and I mean, I was and traveling to like Western European countries, I have to say that I definitely did not feel the weight of racism in the way that I felt it in New York, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say that, I'm talking about like, having experienced like police violence, like knowing what that feels like on your body, right? So I definitely didn't feel that here. But what I didn't realize at the time was that just, of course, the different manifestations and the different ways, and then, different geographies of different histories. So I do think like when a European is saying that, not thinking about race the same way that we as Americans think about it, I do think there is some truth to that, because it's different backgrounds.
Oh, absolutely.
It's totally different geographic, right, and experiences, right? But anyway, so.
I mean, I even think that there is a difference. I mean, Denmark has a very storied legacy, with the slave trade.
Yeah.
But America, it happened right here, like on our land. And our ancestors directly experienced it here. And, I think that makes a little bit of a difference.
Well, I mean, that's also, it's really interesting too, because like you said, Denmark has a history of being involved in the enslavement of Africans and plantations. But the way that so many, like with Europe, the way that they did it was like so far away from their actual country.
Exactly.
So it's like when they, so when they stop having this relationship with their former colonies, it's so interesting that in a way, it's like they really escaped any kind of actually responsibility.
It's kind of like what happened, recently with the UK when Queen Elizabeth died, and there was this big reckoning, and everything that's going on with Prince Harry, calling out the racism while being a part of the whatever. That's a whole other conversation. But and people really realizing, oh, England's really responsible for all this stuff, but like it wasn't happening there, so they felt so removed from it and just conveniently forgot.
Yes, that's totally the hoodwink.
Well, yes,
like that's what James Baldwin, and I always remind people, it's like, yeah, I mean, when you look at, I mean, the hard historical facts, and a lot of people don't like to admit this, but like the United States of America or Australia or New Zealand, Canada, these are white settler states. There is a certain mentality behind the foundation of the country that it may not be what it means to you, it may not be what it means to me, but definitely there's a tradition there that unites. Yeah,
that's the fact of it. Feeling, it's not American pride, it isn't the flag, those are the facts.
Yeah. So
quick, I'm going to take it left. I'm obsessed with your plant journey. So for those of you who haven't read this yet, there's a whole chapter or a couple of chapters about you talk about how plants have been some of your greatest teachers and therapists, and I feel like I do not have a green thumb. I cannot keep anything alive besides my daughter. I'd love to know how a person like me can incorporate these botanical elements into their life. Like maybe start slow and do a little something here and there just to like help me.
Well, that's it. That's totally it. It's just you start to, I mean, for me, it's like, I remember ever since I was a kid, I had this, I really just want to know what these plants are that I'm passing. What's the names? And I was just always irritated that the people around me couldn't tell me what that tree was and da da da. So I went and did it on my own, and I did it a little bit, and I talked to other people. So I know a little bit more now. Like I could walk through a city block and identify a couple of things at least, right? Like that's like what the plant journey is for me. It's just really taking the time to, in your own way, like if you go someplace and you see something that attracts your attention, like really follow what interests you about it. And, you know, with every plant, you know, when you're trying to cultivate plants, it's like, you know, every death is a sacrifice, you know, I mean, if it's like, that's how you learn. I mean, plants are just so forgiving as well. It's like really, it's a beautiful way to, for me, it's been a really great reflection about what's going on with my inner self as what's going on with my house plant.
Yeah, and I
so
actually
just starting simple.
Yeah, starting small. And I know there's like certain plants that, you know, help purify the air, or other plants that you know, sort of serve to calm you in different ways. So yeah, it's they're alive.
Yes, I know. You know, when you just like, for me, it's just reminds me to tap into a quieter, softer side of myself, which is very helpful.
All need, yes, in the chaos of life. So speaking of life, one of your strongest themes, to me at least, as I'm reading Blackgirl on Mars, kind of about pain being instrumental to growth. You talk about your childhood, your childbirth journey, which was harrowing. I actually had to skip it and then come back and read it, because once you start talking about it, I was like, oh, this is triggering. And it's great writing, you know, but I was like, okay, I'll do this later. And then as also your experience with ayahuasca, with the vomiting and, you know, these very intense reactions that are happening in your body. What is that all about? To get to the other side of something?
It's so funny, when I read that question from you, I was like, the first thing
oh, you froze.
That mentality, you know? So I'm like, oh my God, am I like really like subscribing to that on an unconscious level? So, and I think that you can have joy without suffering, but I'm at a point in my life where it's just like, you know, if that suffering has occurred, I am going to mine it to see what lessons the pain can be kind of sort of like a baptism of fire, I guess, in a way. Just like, okay, I don't want to feel like this again. What just happened? Let me look through this, right?
Yeah.
So
definitely.
Are you there?
I'm here. Am I frozen?
Oh no.
I'm here.
Totally.
Can you see me? Oh no. Okay, we're just waiting for Lesley-Ann to reconnect.
I think Lesley-Ann's connection is just a little choppy, but we'll get her back. Do not worry.
Okay. Is there anything I need to do?
No, I think. Do you want to talk a little bit about your travels as a widely traveled person and editor, and you have done so much. So, what is your perspective on travel while we're waiting?
Two things happen. People react to you as an American, which, unless you're in France, people think is really cool. everyone wants to talk about American culture. I study abroad in Spain. And my last name is Williams, and Vanessa Williams was a big singer at the time, and everyone was related to her. Hi, you're back.
What you want to tell your story? Yes. What do you tell us about your story? Let me hear.
No, I was just saying, ER asked me about my travels and what I've experienced traveling the world. I was just telling him how when I studied abroad in Spain, Vanessa Williams was a popular singer at the time, and my last name is Williams, and everyone was like, oh, there's her sister. Like, you know, wherever you go, American culture is highly regarded. And what I was saying was, except for when you're in France, because they're like, oh, tacky. Yeah, you know, my brothers-in-law are very tall Black men. If they travel anywhere in the world, they're instantly thought of as NBA players. You know, it's just people are asking for their autographs. It's a funny thing.
Yeah.
But back to you.
Yeah.
Another part that really resonated with me in the book was when you were talking about moving from Brooklyn to Trinidad and Tobago when you were 10.
Yeah, about 10, 11. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I grew up in a very white neighborhood in Virginia. Me and my sisters were the only Black kids in school, and it was a massive school. And I always dreamt about like living somewhere where Black and brown people were the majority. Like, what is that even like? I couldn't, you know, it's tough to imagine. And you have a line when you say that it was remarkable to be there and see us living with ease, as opposed to Brooklyn sort of hustle. What was that like? What was that about? Do you take that with you?
Definitely. I mean, I remember because when I landed in Trinidad, ever since we got independence, which is a very strange sentence to say, we've had Black and brown prime ministers and presidents. So I remember landing in Trinidad and seeing that. I mean, and this was like, you know, this was way before we had those optics in North America. So that was, definitely made a very big impact. It definitely did. And I definitely felt there was a relief and ease.
Did you feel more empowered when you came back to the States?
Yeah. Not being a minority.
Yeah. No, I mean, that perspective must change everything. I don't know what that's like. I mean, yeah, it's so at odds with what we grow up with here. I mean, even like seeing a Black prime minister, and, you know, that wasn't the experience in America in the 80s. The people in power did not look like us, never look like us. Can you see me? Oh, you're frozen. Uh-oh.
I think because Lesley-Ann is abroad, the internet connection is probably just going to be choppy in and out. So,
okay. We'll just wait for her to come back.
Yeah. Or if you want to speak to your experience as a reader of what resonated most for you, like what was, you mentioned speaking, like skipping over parts that were triggering, like what was a part that you were like, oh, but this is healing, or this is a part that you really connected to?
Well, like I said, I was really, oh, she's back. Hi.
I'm sorry, my internet is not, it's usually very stable. It's plugged in and everything, but it's just one of those days.
It has to be on this day, of course.
Yes. But
it's okay.
Thank you.
So something that was really interesting to me is how you spoke about the worst border violence you've experienced was at the hands of a Black man. And I would really like for you to talk more about that, the internalized oppression. the way colonization breeds mental disturbance in the colonized. As I was reading that, it brought me immediately to the Black police officers earlier this year who killed a Black man. And Black and white people of all races were shocked by this.
Right.
You know, and then it became a conversation of, you know, oh, abolish the police, but, you know, look at these Black men who did exactly what you're accusing the white ones of doing. So can you talk to that a bit?
Well, I mean, first of all, it's interesting because, you know, James Baldwin even talked about that, right? Like, I don't remember the words verbatim, but just like that whole notion that, you know, a lot of people have already been aware of the fact that, you know, it's when you're talking about the police, it's not necessarily the color of the police officer. It's the power that's just kind of ingrained in that position, and you know, the historical roots of that position. I think there was I worked on Ben Crump's book, and I remember there was a statistic in there where they found where it was found that Black officers and Hispanic officers, they had the same sort of statistics as white officers towards, you know, whatever it is, the work that they do out there. So, so yeah, I mean, I think our understanding of the general understanding of these symptoms, they tend to get very blurred because, and again, it's not by accident that they're blurred. I think, I mean, you know, like for example, like not wanting people to talk about critical race theory. So the reason why you want to argue you don't want critical race theory to be practiced is because it sort of like casts light, it puts a language, right, to certain things that has been going on and explains a lot of things, and then you can actually address it. So, yeah. And what was you said something earlier. What was the?
Just the way colonization breeds mental disturbance in the colonized.
Well, yeah, because, and again, you know, that's phenomenon, and it's also not just in the colonized, right? It's also, I mean, it is the whole, one could argue the whole modernization, the whole modernity project is one of mental, you know, dis-ease for humanity, one can argue, right? But yeah, you know, there is, I mean, one of the things that I actually, I touch upon in the book, as you know, is this whole idea about how, like, you know, these subtle stares or words could actually hurt, you know, like science is out there being like, yeah, you know, words actually do hurt. It's not true what they say. So just really understanding the metaphysical aspect of race and racism, because of course race biologically, scientifically is not a real thing, but it was created to implement a certain power structure and way of exploitation, and that's very real. And just because we say, hey, this is illegal, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist anymore, and it hasn't evolved into looking like something else. Or, I mean, it's a very interesting beast.
And there's a lot of talk.
And we have to deal with it. Sorry.
Yeah. Something that is so frustrating to me, it's happening. I don't know if you're on Twitter a lot.
I do go on. But I'm just like looking.
Yeah. There's
so
there's a big conversation on Black Twitter, right? Black American Twitter right now, about who's Black and who isn't, and who gets to claim the Black experience and who doesn't. Recently, Zendaya won an Emmy or a Golden Globe or something, and it was the you know, the first Black woman to win 2 in a row or something like that. And the conversation was, but she's not Black. She's biracial, and that's a completely different experience. And then there's all this talk about white passing and white presenting, and it all gets very confused, and it comes from, to me, such a place of not understanding history. Like, to break up the experience in these, you know, well, your dad's white, your mom's Black. Like, if you are a Black person in the Western Hemisphere, you have all kinds of in you. When it, like, who's making these lines of delineation? It's really frustrating, and also what they want. You know, like what like all of this dissension. And that's why I think.
But it must be fascinating to follow on Twitter, though, because the writing can be so good there sometimes.
So good. If you go deep, 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 like in a thread, like just stumble upon.
Like, I can imagine. It's amazing.
And that's when you know, the punchline of all of this is that it's all made up. It's all made up.
Yeah.
Like, what are we arguing
with
about?
Very real consequences, right?
Yeah. So also something that you talk about is the flux community.
Yes.
So, and I hung out with you there when we were in our early 20s, and it's this fabulous home where all these different kinds of very artistic, cool people live. This is my memory of it, 25 years later. And like, each of you had your own bedrooms, and they were decorated so cool, and there was this like common living space, and it was like this, like,
we had a pool table, remember?
Yes. And it was just like this really chic, interesting, like, dorm in this warehouse kind of. I'm new to New York. I'm like, what is even happening? This is the coolest thing. What is it you like about community living?
I mean, that was definitely one of the best living arrangements I had. And it was really very interesting. The people and the way that the house looked and everything. It was fun. But the community, it was exactly that, the community. It was just really, for a while, I mean, we were, you know, sometimes we were like 18 people there, if not more. We were a community. I love that. And you didn't have to socialize if you didn't want to. You had your own room. And then when you came out, you know, there were like people who you liked hang out in the living room or in the kitchen, or it was really, I mean, I really enjoyed that. I think it was a really special time.
And I love hearing that. Yeah, it was an amazing time. You know, more and more single women are doing this now. You know, these communities of.
I mean, it's a fabulous way to live. I mean, it's really I really love it. I can't, I mean, it's not like, I think living different types of way are attractive to me, but that definitely, in different times of one's life, that can work.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely.
And kind of along the same vein, there was a line in the book where you said, "I don't believe in leaders."
Yeah, that's true.
I need to know more about that. I have to understand, like, what do you mean? Like, in what context?
Okay, so I'm one of these people who think that, like, so I have this idea that everyone is equipped to lead themselves. Like, that's my whole belief system, and you know, it can change, but I'm like, I don't believe there's anyone outside of myself that has more power than me, that should have more power than me, and vice versa. I don't think, like, I don't believe in, like, you know, governments. I write about my whole relationship to nation states, for example. Like, I think the whole idea about leadership, it makes it so much easier for people to be led astray. And I think that's what we see a lot of.
Oh, of course.
But, you know, we live in a culture where we have things such as cult of personality. I mean, there's so much things going on. But leadership is a funny side. It really, really is.
Well, it's
a rare person who can be a leader and not get completely corrupted by that power.
I mean, I don't know that there's a way not to become corrupted.
Right, exactly.
But at the same time, it's like you put a group of people together on an island, someone is gonna, it's like Lord of the Flies. It just
see, but that's what I'm saying. Like, and that's so interesting that we say, okay, Lord of the Flies. Like, we have these references because to me, I think like that is why we're socialized with literature like that, to get this idea that that's universally how human beings act. And I don't think that's true. One of the things I didn't really get into and that I wanted to get to more in this book was that when I was in Brooklyn during the pandemic was how organized the whole mutual aid community was. Like on Facebook, they were like, if you need food, they had like fridges, bedside. I think it was I forgot what the name of it, mutual aid. And I mean, just to see how it works. And then it reminded me of this essay that I had read years ago about this. There was this power shortage that like took out power in a very broad swathe of states and cities in New York in the States during the 70s.
Oh,
and you would think that. I don't know if it was that one. For some reason, it was because I remember looking and being like, is that the same one? But it wasn't. But it was like a really large portion of the Eastern Coast was like down power. Some places like for 13 hours, like it was crazy.
Yeah.
And what ended up happening in all of the different places was that people ended up reporting back about their experiences as almost as though it was a spiritual experience. Like people who were stuck on trains for 13 hours, people who were like, people who were like, I mean, people just, it released something in people, like a goodness. See, we don't hear that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Never. You hear about chaos.
But that's what I'm saying. Right. Yeah. And I know I was thinking about that too. I was like, it's so interesting. Like European fairy tales are like, witches eating children or wolves and da-da-da. And then when you think about Anansi and all of these like indigenous, African or, Native Pacific, all these different folklores, they're so gentle. They're so beautiful. They're so loving. They're about being clever.
That is so true. You have enlightened me. And how and then this
no pun intended.
Right. No pun. So this also, I was so interested in you're talking about, teaching, like how you're a Black American woman in a European country teaching a class that's a mixed bag.
Yeah.
Biracial son.
Yeah.
How do you approach teaching overseas in that way? Like how do you even approach questions of race and nationality?
Well, first of all, here on these shores, they don't really like to talk about race because it doesn't exist. But most of my students are, in my teaching career, I've taught many different demographics, but most of my students have been like from the Middle East, North Africa, Danish, of course, very international. And I'm myself. I mean, whatever it is that you've known me for how many years? So it's just, I am who I am in my teaching, and as I am when we sit and we talk, as we are now. It's I have my experiences that I share with my students, and my students have their experiences that they share with me, and hopefully we learn from that.
And you don't hold back.
No, not at all. Not if they want to know. But I have to say, one of the biggest surprises I've had in my teaching career was just how interested people are in America. People are so curious. Mm-hmm. So curious. Even people who you would suspect would just like have no reason to be interested. America has really crafted quite a image of itself. We've done a great job of that.
Oh yeah. Yeah, we're really good at the image.
Yeah.
And especially, I'm sure when you tell people you're from Brooklyn, because that, you know, Brooklyn is.
Well, people don't know what that means, Tia. I mean, it's like, if I tell people I'm from Brooklyn now, what does that mean to people now, as opposed to if I told people I was from Brooklyn like back in the 90s? It's like two different places now.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, there's still like Brooklyn is used as a reference point culturally. It's used in fashion all over the world.
That's so true.
Oh, that's a Brooklyn hipster, you know. What's that in Copenhagen? Christiania is the Brooklyn of Copenhagen. You know, it's used.
Right. Yes, that's right. Yes.
Like if something is cool and artsy and a little bit edgy, it's Brooklyn.
Yes. It's definitely a brand, that's for sure.
It is a brand.
I just feel so old girl lately.
I know. Me too. And what did it happen? We were always the youngest ones.
You know, you were always way younger than me. Are you kidding me?
You know what it is? I'm only 2 years younger than you, but when you're, you know, 23 and 25, it makes a difference.
Right. That's right. Oh, I always thought you were much younger. That's so funny.
That's it. It's just that I was new to New York, you know, and you were seasoned.
Yeah.
Speaking of memories and nostalgia, there was a part that was like what it like knocked my socks off. So towards the end, you talk about finding, or you're finding boxes in your mom's house, or she gave them to you, and they were boxes of old memories, like from your life, writings, and letters, and you threw them all, and then you burned them.
Yes.
And I was like clutching my pearls because I'm such a sentimentalist. Like I keep, you know, I'm a hoarder.
I hear you.
Talk to me about that. And I know people who do that. It's like I've processed it. It's over. We're moving on. What is that? How did you get there?
Okay, so to be 100% real with you, I made a decision a few years ago, even before coming across this, you know, treasure trove that my mom had. I made a decision that I wanted to start getting rid of everything because I couldn't bear this idea of dying and leaving a ton of shit.
Yes.
And it might sound morbid to people, but I'm not relating to it like that at all.
Okay.
I'm not. I'm just really like, and then, you know, what I realized when I found that at my mom's house was that it was such, I mean, if I invested time, the time that it took to unpack what I had found to truly unpack that would have been like another lifetime. And then for me, it's just sort of like, I also have this whole thing about material things. Like I'm, you know, so in our Western culture, we're like the archive, we have museums, we have, you know, we're very, so in my way, I'm having a conversation with myself as well about what am I leaving? If I'm leaving anything, just the personal. It's not like I'm thinking about myself as like, okay, this is going to the Library of Congress. I mean, maybe, but I'm just saying, like, for me, I'm just more like, I guess, decolonizing my relationship to these things. And it's not an easy relationship to have. I have been like, wow, you know, you have, because I've been I still have boxes of journals, despite the fact that I've gotten rid of like boxes of journals. Like I'm just I'm a natural archivist. Is that the word?
That's the word.
So yeah, I mean, this is a personal relation thing that I'm doing with myself. It's just something I'm committed to.
I love that. That is my goal. I'm so unable to do that. It's almost like anthropomorphizing. Is that the word? Things around.
Yeah, and that's okay too. I mean,
it's really hard to decide which material parts of yourself are important enough to keep. But you know what? I completely hear what you're saying about, you know, Yeah, and it's not morbid, dying and leaving a bunch of stuff everywhere for people.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Right. You know, so I'm just sort of like, I'm just being more mindful around that.
Mm-hmm.
And then also for practical reasons as well, because, you know, one could get to the point you hear about people, you see cases of people where it's like, you know, your house turns into like this, or you have storage space and it's just filled with, you know, I mean, I'm not saying we're all like that, but I'm just saying that for me, like I definitely have a hoarding thing going on in my family. So I just really try to also be on top of that.
Yeah. And speaking of family, you talk a lot about your mother and your grandmother.
Yeah.
And I'm so drawn to that matrilineal experience. And the idea of generational curses and I think we lost her.
We'll keep telling your story about matrilineal curses.
Oh.
Because she can hear you, just so you know, she can usually hear you even
She can hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, just it's something that I write about in my work too. The idea of something that your great grandmother experienced, you know, the reverberations of that can be felt throughout generations, or, you know, where things that we do, you don't see the end of in your lifetime. Sometimes it keeps going with your descendants. And here she is.
I love all of you.
Like we lost her. And anytime your grandmother and your mother show up on the page, I just perk up. And
oh, beautiful.
Yeah, I just love it. And you learn so much about who you are when you learn about where you come from. And I would love for you to just speak a little to that, like, you know, learning to forgive and accept and, you know, be cozy with who your ancestors are.
Getting cozy with your ancestors, right? I mean, for me, I just sort of feel like it was a natural compulsion of mine to, I just had this, I mean, I'm not anywhere near there. People who relate to their ancestors on some really deep spiritual ritual levels. I'm not anywhere near that, just to say that, because it's definitely a tradition for many people, and I don't practice it in a traditional sense. I practice it from an intuitive, and also for my writing for me has always been sort of like an aspect of my spirituality, or trying to develop that. And I just always kind of like knew from a very young age. I mean, who else do you look towards than your parents and your family? I mean, it's sort of like a natural compulsion to be like, hey, why am I here? you're, you know, they're who you ask questions, or where you learn behavior. In my mind, when I was a kid, I couldn't understand why my parents couldn't answer me, you know, these very important questions that I had. So, and then you grow up with these cast of characters, for better or for worse, when as a child, and different generations and different geographies and locations, and you sort of have to like decipher these codes that you've inherited to sort of deconstruct the world that you're in, and to sort of figure out how you're going to live it. And I mean, a lot of it, so much of it was, you know, I didn't have a lot of people to really truly talk to. I mean, I demanded it of my surroundings, but that doesn't necessarily mean that I always got it, or
right.
It was there. So those things, and I think that's very universal. And I think especially if you're a girl. I mean, I really experienced as a girl growing up that I just wasn't seen and appreciated the same way that the boys were in my family. Simple things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. And just that yearning for clarity.
Yes.
You know,
Yeah.
and sometimes it doesn't happen until you get older.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Mm.
It's interesting. Yeah, my walls are covered the way I do. I don't have, that intense ritualistic practice that some of the people I know do with their ancestors. But like for me, I have old pictures all over my house of
Yes.
everyone that I can get a handle on. It's
Beautiful.
for them to be around me. It's important for
Yes.
them to witness me and for me to witness them. Important for my daughter to see.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how we all, in our different ways, keep these people alive because they walk with us.
Absolutely. Yes, they are in us. We are them. I mean, that's the thing. That's what's so, I mean, the biological truth of it. It's like we are our ancestors. And I just am so fascinated by that.
Yes.
And yeah, it's just a beautiful, your lineage. It's like, I mean, just uncovering it, the whole practice of that in itself is an act of self-love.
Yes, it's true. It is.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, thinking about self-love, it takes me to the last words in your book, which are home is everywhere I am, which I love to relate to. It means so many things. For me, the first thing I thought of was, my father was in the military, so we moved around a lot. Every time I started a new school, I said, this is the new me. And then within 5 minutes, like, it doesn't matter. Like, you take yourself wherever you go.
I love it.
But then it can also, it takes you to that place of I can make a home wherever I am because
yes.
What were you thinking?
Totally. Okay, so great question. So for me, when I embarked on this, book tour, this whole trip that I chronicle, I have this book right in my hand, which is the One Straw Revolution that I talk about. And the story in this is that, and I sort of tell it in the beginning, it's like, this guy, the scientist, he had a nervous breakdown and he goes to the countryside to sort of like, to reevaluate his life. And when he goes to the countryside, his healing sort of begins. So in a lot of ways, it's like, for me, it's just like when I took off on this trip, I was just in such a, I was stressed out from my job. I had been here for X amount of years. There was just so much stuff going on. My body was just totally like, there's been a lot of talk about trauma in the last few years and how it's stored in our bodies, the way that we embody our emotions, et cetera. So I've been sort of like, keeping my ears to the ground in that respect, because I, just as all this information is coming out, I'm realizing like, wow, what's going on with my body? Am I like so disembodied? Like what's going? So really doing this, this very deep dive into it, and which coincided with the same way of like the mainstreaming of this information. It was really interesting, but then just realizing like, hey, my nervous system is really dysregulated. I need to fix it. And I need to be okay no matter where I am. I have to get my nervous system to the point where I'm able to respond to whatever's around me. But, if you're living in a state of fear, whether it's because, the news is telling you there's a terrorist here, or health, or a pandemic, or whatever. I mean, if you're living in a state of fear, it's so difficult to be in a state of ease and deal with each other where we are seeing each other as humanity. So being at home, being really like that master within yourself, like no matter where you are, if you're the only Black person in a room full of people of other whatever, being able to handle it energetically.
Right. It's like the thing that we teach kids, like you can't control anyone else or anything else. You can only react.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is like a lifelong practice. It's the hardest thing to master.
It is.
Especially for someone like you, for both of us, they're, artists, like we're sponges and we're very, whatever room we're in, we're sucking it up. It's so hard to turn
Yes.
off.
Yes.
But it's also what makes
Absolutely.
you a brilliant writer.
Yes. Thank you. You too.
Well, we have come to the end of our chat. This was fabulous, and I am so proud and so inspired just to know you. I love your book.
Tia, I feel the same way, and thank you so much for having my back every time my internet went down. And thank you for everybody who came. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And
you know, I love you and I adore you, and I love your writing.
Thank you. It's a love fest. ER, we're inviting you back.
Excellent. I am coming back. Okay. Well, thank y'all both so much. I'm glad that our cross-country internet held up enough that we could have a robust conversation. So thanks for your patience.
Thank you guys for your patience.
Of course. Thanks to everybody watching from around the world. The best way you can support Charis and, of course, Lesley-Ann is by clicking this teal button at the bottom of the screen to buy Blackgirl on Mars from Charis. It's a one-click. It'll get you there. You can also, of course, support Tia Williams. All of her novels are one-click as well if you go through there. So please check it out. Buy your books today, and look out for Tia's Netflix show coming out. When is the show coming out?
June 23rd.
Okay, so
so exciting.
Be on there, get the ratings up for that. And is there anywhere online you want folks to follow y'all, or any other projects you want to shout out before we say goodbye?
Tia?
I'm on Instagram, Tia Williams Writes, and pretty much all my information about what's going on is there. So
awesome.
Yeah. Yes, and you can find me at either Blackgirl on Mars or at Bandit Queen Press, or my name on most of the socials.
Well, thank y'all both so much. Stay safe and well, and until next time, we really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, ER. Thank you. Bye, Tia. Thank you so much.